Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you powerful tales of love, transformation, and profound lessons learned along the way. Today, we dive into the journey of Jake, a young millionaire caught in an arranged marriage that challenges everything he thought he knew about relationships. His story is one of discovery, not just of his wife, Emily, but of himself, as they navigate through misunderstandings, expectations, and secrets. Their bond grows into something more meaningful than either could have imagined. So sit back, relax, and subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey of love and personal growth. Jake sat at the head of the long, polished table in his family's vast estate in Chicago. The grandeur of the surroundings a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing in his chest. The crystal chandelier above bathed the room in warm light, but none of it could ease the growing frustration he felt. His parents, as composed as ever, sat across from him, speaking in calm, measured tones about a future he had never chosen. A future that wasn't his. "This isn't happening," Jake muttered under his breath, pushing aside his plate of steak that had long gone cold. Untouched, his fingers curled around the edge of the table, a mix of anger and disbelief churning within him. "Jake," his father's voice was firm, yet restrained, as if this had been a conversation they had already had too many times. "This isn't a request. It's a decision that has already been made." The words hit him like a slap. A decision made without him. Without any regard for his own wishes. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his tousled dark hair. A decision, he thought bitterly, that had been made for him. As though his opinion didn't matter at all. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice rising in frustration. His mother, sitting across from him, gave a sharp sigh. "Enough with the sarcasm, Jake. This isn't just about you. It's about the family. It's about preserving what we've built." Jake's eyes narrowed, the tension mounting with every word his mother spoke. Preserving the family. He had heard that phrase too many times. Always tied to an expectation of conformity, of duty. His life, his freedom, his choices, none of it seemed to matter. "And the way to preserve it is by marrying me off to a woman I've never even met? Like it's the 18th century? Jake's voice held a biting edge, his frustration spilling over. "You'll meet her soon enough," his father replied, setting down his glass of wine, the clink of it against the crystal almost mocking. "Her name is Emily, she's from a respectable family. And this arrangement benefits everyone." Jake could feel his jaw tighten. Respectable family. That word didn't sit well with him. Respectable family. Huh? Jake scoffed. "Is that why she hides behind a veil? What is she hiding? A scar? A secret identity?" "Don't be cruel, Jake," his mother snapped, her voice suddenly sharp with reproach. "Emily is a private person. She has her reasons for keeping her face hidden. She doesn't owe you an explanation." Jake's mind raced. There was something about all of this that felt wrong. His entire life had been mapped out for him. Decisions made behind closed doors. All for the sake of preserving business partnerships. Building empires. But what about his future? What about his happiness? "Why me?" he demanded, leaning forward. "Why not let her marry someone else who's willing to play along?" "Because you're the heir to this family," his father said, his voice resolute, unwavering. "You carry the weight of everything we've built. This marriage isn't just about the union of two people, it's about business. About expanding our influence. It's as much a partnership as it is a personal commitment." Jake let out a dry laugh. "So, it's a transaction, then. Love clearly has no place here." His mother's expression softened slightly, but her words didn't ease his anger. "Don't be dramatic, Jake. You're not being asked to fall in love with her. You're being asked to respect her. To fulfill your duty." Duty. Jake clenched his fists on the table. His entire life, his entire future had been reduced to that one word. Duty. To his family, to his name, to their wealth. He'd never had the freedom to choose what he truly wanted. "My duty?" he repeated, his voice low and simmering with rage. "My duty to marry a stranger? To give up any chance of choosing my own future? You'll have everything you could ever need," his father replied calmly, As if you were speaking to a child throwing a tantrum. So will she. Jake stood abruptly, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. I don't need this, he said, his voice thick with anger. And I certainly don't need her. His mother stood as well, her voice firm, yet oddly final. You'll meet her tomorrow, at dinner, and I expect you to behave like the man we raised you to be. The weight of their expectations felt like a suffocating blanket over him. His parents, steadfast in their belief that this was the right decision, were blind to how trapped he felt. Without a word, Jake turned and stormed out of the dining room. The tension between him and his family palpable, thick enough to choke him. Upstairs in his room, Jake poured himself a glass of whiskey, the burn of it doing little to numb the rage that still simmered within him. He stared out the window, the city lights flickering below. But his thoughts were miles away. Tomorrow he would meet this Emily and see for himself what kind of game his parents were playing. One thing was certain, he wasn't going to make this easy for anyone. The next evening, Jake's unease grew as the Whitman estate buzzed with quiet activity. The grand dining room was prepared meticulously, a stage set for yet another business arrangement disguised as a union of two people. Jake could feel his frustration tightening with every passing minute. When he entered the formal sitting room, his father greeted him with a nod, his face an unreadable mask. His mother gave him a tight-lipped smile, but her eyes seemed to be constantly assessing him, evaluating his every reaction. She was probably expecting him to perform, to behave with the politeness and grace expected of him. She'll be here soon, his mother said, smoothing out the creases of her dress, an air of finality in her words. Jake only nodded, though the dread bubbling in his stomach was almost overwhelming. It wasn't long before he heard the sound of heels clicking against the polished floor. Steady and deliberate, his eyes lifted instinctively, and there she was, Emily, the woman he had been forced to meet, walked in with the poise of someone who had always been the center of attention. Her long veil cascaded down to her shoulders, covering her face completely, except for her eyes, which were an almost unnatural shade of gray. They were sharp, piercing, and when they met his gaze, it felt as though they saw right through him. Jake wasn't sure what to make of her. She had an air of quiet authority, a self-assuredness that seemed to put him on edge. His mother stepped forward, her voice welcoming, but Jake's mind was too clouded with his own frustration to truly listen. This is Emily, his mother introduced her with a forced smile. Emily, this is Jake. Emily inclined her head slightly, her voice soft but clear, almost clinical in its politeness. It's a pleasure to meet you, Jake. Jake hesitated before extending his hand, the gesture automatic, but his mind was racing. His thoughts were consumed by the veil, by the mystery that surrounded her. And he couldn't help but feel irritated by the whole situation. The dinner was as awkward as he had expected. His attention kept drifting back to Emily, watching her sit in perfect stillness, her eyes never leaving the table for too long. Despite the conversations between their parents, which seemed to try and fill the silence with small talk, Jake couldn't focus on anything but Emily. And that damn veil. Halfway through the meal, Jake couldn't take it anymore. His frustration reached its peak, and he turned to Emily, lowering his voice but making sure his words were pointed. You don't have to keep that on. You know, no one here is going to judge you. His mother shot him a warning glance, but Emily remained unbothered, her gaze flicked toward him, steady and calm, almost detached. I appreciate your concern, she said, her voice soft but firm. But I prefer to keep it on. Why? Jake pushed, feeling his irritation flare. What are you hiding? His mother's voice was sharp, cutting through the air. Jake. But Emily interrupted her, her eyes unwavering. I'm not hiding anything that matters. The words hung in the air for a moment, and Jake felt a flicker of uncertainty in his chest. The way she said it, so calmly, so confidently, unsettled him. Jake leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. Arrangement. Huh? That's an interesting word for a marriage. Emily tilted her head slightly, her gaze never leaving his. Isn't that what this is? An arrangement? Your parents need an alliance. And my family needs the same. There's no need to complicate it with unnecessary emotions or expectations. Her words struck him hard. They landed like a slap, leaving him stunned, unable to respond immediately. It was so clinical, so detached, that he couldn't help but wonder if she was right. Was this really just a business deal? A marriage of convenience? Jake opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, his frustration and confusion welled up inside him. He just didn't know what to make of her. She was so composed, so calm, as though none of this bothered her at all. I want to know who I'm marrying, Jake said finally, his voice quieter now but still firm. Not just your name, or your family. I want to know you. Emily regarded him for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. You will, in time, she said softly, but for now, all you need to know is that I understand my role in this union. I hope you'll understand yours. Her words hit Jake like a punch to the gut. There was something about the way she said it, so matter-of-factly, that made him feel small, as though his feelings didn't even matter. Before he could respond, Emily's father cleared his throat, breaking the tension with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. Perhaps we should move on to dessert, he suggested, his voice light but firm. And just like that, the conversation was over. The rest of the evening passed in strained silence, the tension between Jake and Emily palpable. She remained as poised and mysterious as ever, and Jake couldn't help but feel that he was completely out of his depth. The day of the wedding arrived with the kind of extravagance that only a union between two wealthy families could command. Jake stood at the end of the long aisle, the opulent ballroom around him shimmering with crystal chandeliers and fresh flowers. He had never felt more out of place. The room was filled with well-dressed guests murmuring with excitement, their gazes flitting between him and the grand ceremony. It all felt like a performance, one in which he was reluctantly cast as the lead. As he stood there, the heaviness in his chest grew. This wasn't a day of celebration for him, it was a day of obligation. The weight of the guests' expectant stares, the whispers in the air, all of it felt suffocating. The moment Emily walked down the aisle would mark the end of his own hopes for a future of freedom and choice. When the music began, Jake's breath caught in his throat. Emily, his bride, appeared at the top of the staircase, her figure enveloped in a flowing white gown, the veil still draped over her face. She moved gracefully, with a presence that could command attention without a word. Every eye in the room followed her, captivated by her beauty, yet she remained a mystery to all. The veil concealed her face entirely, leaving only her posture and the sharpness of her gray eyes visible. Those eyes, they seemed to pierce through him, full of secrets he had yet to understand. Jake's stomach twisted as he watched her approach. The weight of every gaze in the room felt unbearable. Whispers fluttered like insects in the background. Why won't she take off the veil? Maybe she's hiding something. As Emily reached him, Jake could feel the eyes of the room on them. The ceremony proceeded, but Jake couldn't shake the discomfort. It felt more like a business transaction than a union of two people. When it was time for the vows, he could barely focus. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and the moment for the kiss arrived. Jake glanced at Emily, but she still hadn't lifted her veil. With a resigned sigh, he leaned in, placing a brief kiss on the fabric that covered her cheek. The touch was brief, distant, and cold. Polite applause followed, but Jake couldn't escape the feeling that something was missing. It wasn't just the lack of affection, it was the emotional disconnect that seemed to hang over the entire event. Emily remained a stranger to him, and the room buzzed with the unspoken judgment of their mismatched union. The reception was held in another grand room, filled with champagne, music, and laughter, but the atmosphere between Jake and Emily remained stiff. They sat side by side at the head table, the distance between them palpable. Emily, as always, was composed, her demeanor calm and unruffled. Jake, on the other hand, found himself scanning the room, avoiding eye contact. He couldn't shake the feeling that the entire evening had become a show for others to watch. A performance he had never wanted to be a part of. Guests whispered about her, the mystery of her veiled face. Was she hiding a scar? Was there something wrong with her? Jake clenched his jaw, irritation bubbling up again. The whispers were louder now, sharper, and more judgmental. He stole a glance at Emily, who sat quietly, unmoved by the murmurs around her. Her posture remained elegant, her face expressionless beneath the veil. But what bothered Jake the most was how she seemed utterly unfazed by it all. Later, when the night finally drew to a close, Jake escorted Emily and her father to the door. As she turned to leave, her hand on the doorframe, he couldn't stop himself from asking, "Why do you act like this doesn't matter?" Emily paused, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, her expression softened. "It matters," she said quietly, "but not in the way you think." And with that, she stepped out into the night, leaving Jake standing there, his frustration now mixed with a flicker of curiosity that he couldn't quite shake. The rest of the evening was a blur of polite exchanges and distant formalities. Jake couldn't help but wonder, who was this woman he had married? What did she hide behind that veil? And more importantly, what did it mean for their future together? The questions swirled in his mind, unanswered. But one thing was certain. Emily was far more than he had initially thought. And perhaps, in time, he would come to understand her. As the days turned into weeks, Jake and Emily's relationship slowly transformed. Though the veil was still there, a physical barrier between them, it became less of a mystery and more of a symbol of the journey they were both on. Slowly, Jake began to see the woman beneath the veil, not just as his wife but as an individual with depth, intelligence, and a quiet strength that surprised him. Their conversations, once filled with tension, grew more open, more real. Emily shared her thoughts, her ideas, and Jake found himself drawn to her not just for her beauty, but for the way she saw the world. She had been right all along. This marriage was an arrangement. But it was also an opportunity for them to grow together, to challenge each other and become better people, both personally and professionally. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Jake turned to Emily and, for the first time, spoke without reservation. "I see you, Emily. I see everything you are. And I'm sorry for not understanding it sooner." Emily smiled softly, her eyes bright with a mixture of understanding and hope. "We all have our blind spots, Jake. But what matters is that we're here now. Together." They had learned the profound lesson that love isn't about appearances or expectations. It's about seeing each other fully, embracing who you truly are. As they stood there, their hands intertwined, Jake knew their journey together was only just beginning. For more incredible tales of love, resilience, and transformation, make sure to subscribe to the Life Stories channel. Thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next time with another story that's sure to warm your heart.